Well, I just want to say welcome again to all of you in here, and those of you who are tuning in online. Grateful that you are with us as well. My name is Jeremy, if we haven't met, and I'm the service programming director here at North Point. And all that means is I have a privilege of working alongside a team of people each and every week, and we get to create the Sunday morning experience. So everything that happens with guest services coming in and our production team there in the back in the booth and the cameras, a media team throughout the week, developing all the media things and music up here. And I absolutely love what I get to do. It is such a privilege. And honestly, today I'm really humbled and just honored to be able to follow Buck in this series. It's been a series all about leadership, and Buck has been doing the last 3 weeks. Today we're wrapping it up with part 4. But I have been led by Buck and mentored by him for almost over a decade now. And so to be able to follow him in this series is just really, really exciting, and I'm pumped to jump in. And it's been all about leadership, and we've kind of been basing the premise of this series on this proverb that was written thousands of years ago. And this proverb says this. It says, "But a nation will be strong and endure when it has intelligent, sensible leaders." And we've been saying that's true when it comes to family and career. A family, a career, a marriage, a relationship, all of these things that we experience will be strong and endure when there is intelligent and sensible leadership. And leadership is essentially just influence. And we all have influence in some area of our life, and we're all leaders in some area of our life. But to wrap up our series, before we could just kind of move on and get out of a leadership series, there's one specific thing that we wanted to talk about. And it's a really important component of leadership because we can't cover everything there possibly is to say about leadership. We all have so many areas to learn, but this one thing we had to make sure we hit on in this series. And it really centers all around this word right here, endure. Endure. That intelligent and sensible leaders understand what it means to endure. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, when COVID hit, I picked up a couple of new habits. Some of these were good, some of these were bad. I'm curious, just by a show of hands, raise your hand if you picked up a new habit as a result of COVID, working from home, all those things. Yeah, a lot of us did. And so we were working from home in like the spring and early summer, and for me, I was instantly like so stoked because I'm a huge introvert. I love, I love not having to talk to people. This is easy because nobody ever says anything back most of the time. But I love not having to talk to people, so just being on a screen all day, and you get off a Zoom call, you close it, that's it, like fantastic. And so I'd wake up each day, and I'd be excited. I'd make my coffee, have my morning time, and then I'd go into our office, and I'd open up my computer. And the best part is, like, forgetting pants, not, wearing pants didn't matter because Zoom calls are only, like, here and up. So, like, nobody had to know, so that was totally fine, too. But what I quickly discovered is that all of those things, like getting dressed and driving to work and starting and stopping my workday, all of those things actually provide a structure in my life that allows me to be more productive. And I learned this very fast because work and home was not the best for me. And so I started to kind of put some of those things back in my life. For instance, putting pants on, it's a key component of going to work each day. Not only getting dressed and starting and stopping my workday at specific times, I made sure to do that. But one of the things that I really was missing out on is going to the gym. I loved going to the gym. It just helped provide that structure in my day. And so what I did instead is I decided to start running, like walk out the door and you just run, kind of running. Like, it was terrifying for me because I don't know if you can tell, I might look really tall up here on stage, but I don't know if you can tell, these little legs of mine were not built to run. And so when I started to try to run, like, this was completely new for me, but it's something I grew to enjoy. I didn't like it at first, but I grew to enjoy it. I'm still trying to hang on to that habit today. But as I did it, I really realized that running is really centered around this word right here, endurance. This is easy for us to understand, but it's pushing yourself to go faster, have better endurance, or pushing yourself to go further with endurance. I had a buddy of mine, we were having coffee a couple of years back, and he was going off to run this race. He was telling me about it, and he's kind of an endurance athlete. Like, he's one of those crazy people. And he was telling me that he was running this race called the Western States 100. And I wasn't a runner at this time, so I didn't know anything, so I just responded to him, and I said, "Man, that is insane. You're going to run for 100 minutes straight? Like, that is crazy." And then I went on to realize, no, it was a 30-hour time cap, and he had to run 100 miles in this 30-hour time cap in the mountains in California. And I was like, you want to do this? Like, just to make sure, like, nobody's forcing you or anything, right? But he went off, and he did it, and he was successful. He came back. He told me about the whole race, and he told me that he got around mile 80 or 90, and he went off course about 6 miles. Just think about that. I mean, you've run 80 miles at this point, and you go off course. So he said, I did what any logical person would do. I turned back around, went 6 miles back on course, and I finished the race. And I just thought to myself, like, if I'm 6 miles off course, I'm dead at that point. Like, I am not coming back at that point. But I was so in awe of him when he told me this. I was so in awe of his ability to endure, just to push himself to these extremes. I think that human ability is just amazing to do this. Because that word endure essentially means this. It means to suffer patiently. That's not very exciting, but that's what endure means. It means to suffer patiently, to hold out. And I think that, some of the people, the greatest leaders and people in life, not just runners, but the greatest leaders in life understand what it means to endure in all of the kind of everyday aspects that we experience. And there's this enduring aspect when it comes to our finances at times, right? I mean, where we're kind of just enduring and we're hoping and we're holding out for a better future. There's an enduring aspect at times when it comes to marriage. I mean, marriage is fantastic, but it's not always rainbows and butterflies. And so sometimes there's this an enduring component where we're holding out or we're working, we're striving for a better outcome in the future. I don't have kids, so I don't think there's any enduring aspect to having kids. Just kidding. I know, and you have to endure when it comes to kids. There's enduring when it comes to your career, right? I mean, sometimes things are going great, but it's just waking up. It's the daily struggle, time after time after time again. And there's enduring when it comes to faith as well sometimes. We just feel like, what are we doing? Like, we just keep coming to church. We keep checking the box. Like, is God even there? Does he even hear me? And there's kind of this enduring space. And you see, when we're in these seasons, there's actually a term in psychology for this, and it's called liminal space. Liminal space. And we went through a book as a leadership team here at North Point. It was called Leadership Pain. It was fantastic. It was so helpful. And the author, Samuel Chan, I'm gonna reference him a couple times throughout our time this morning. And the author says this when it comes to liminal space. Here's how he describes it. He says, liminal space is a concept in theology and psychology. It is the intermediate, in-between, transitional state where you cannot go back to where you were, because a threshold has been crossed. And you have yet to arrive where you are going because it is not yet available to you. Essentially, it is the hallway between the past and the future. So liminal space is this hallway, per se, where we are striving and we're working, we're enduring. We've passed where we were, but we're not quite where we want to be yet. And we all step into a hallway. Maybe it'll look something like this in some metaphor of life, but we step into a hallway, and it's like stepping into a marriage or having kids or stepping into a new career or moving to a new area or placing our faith in Christ, where all of a sudden our life is now intertwined with our relationship with God, and we step into this space. And sometimes what we experience along the way is we're enduring, but not only that, what we bump into is that in these spaces, life happens, right? I mean, we hit struggles, or there are setbacks that we experience. There's hardship along the way. And sometimes this hardship is harder than others. And in fact, Samuel Chan describes it this way. He says, I tell you quite candidly, it's hell in the hallway. It's hell in the hallway. Now, if you were coming in today and you were like, man, I'm so excited for church, I'm going to be so encouraged, I'm going to feel so happy walking out, it's going to be so joyful, then I would just say, like, hang in with me for just a second because we're going to get there. But what the reality is, we all face this, that we all experience. There are moments when we are enduring and we can't get to where we want to go, and sometimes it can just feel like hell in the hallway. And so what do we do with those moments? How do we endure in those moments? Well, there is good news. He goes on to describe, I love this statement, it's so powerful. He says, we cannot stop what happens to us, but we can certainly stop what happens in us. I want to read that again, because for me personally, like, this is so amazing. We cannot stop what happens to us. We can't control our external circumstances, but we can certainly stop what happens in us. We all have an ability, an opportunity to understand what it means to endure in these seasons so that one day we get to the end of that hallway, the end of that liminal space, and we look back on our life and we can have those moments we all desire where we say to ourselves, you know what? I'm so glad I fought for that. I fought the good fight. I was faithful to him or to her. I have a relationship with my kids. I'm proud I spent that time investing in their life. I lived in such a way that my life impacted those around me. I wasn't just all about myself. I did what I was called to do. I think we'd all agree that as we get to the end of our life, we desire to say those kind of things. But the thing is that it takes something from us. It requires something of each of us. And it requires us to lean into this fourth brick of leadership that we're going to unpack. We've been unpacking one brick every single time, and we're going to unpack this fourth one, and it gives us an incredible ability and insight into what it means to endure as leaders and people in our lives. And we get this brick from this man named Nehemiah. He was a leader. He lived about 2,400 years ago, 444 BC. And the reason we're looking at his life specifically is because there's the book of Nehemiah in the Old Testament, and it's considered to be one of the best leadership resources, best leadership letters in history because of the way that he lived his life and his ability to endure. Now, Nehemiah was a Jewish man, but he was underneath the king of Persia at this time, and he was the cupbearer, so he was kind of like a right-hand guy to the king of Persia. But he's a Jewish man, and like all of us, he had dreams, he had hopes, he had desires for his life. And Nehemiah's big desire in his life was this: he wanted to rebuild the nation of Israel. Because the nation of Israel, the Jewish people at this point, basically looked like this pile of bricks right now. It was a pile of rubble. The nation was in complete disarray. It had been conquered. It was currently ruled over by Persia, but they'd been conquered over and over and over again. And specifically, the city of Jerusalem, the center of the nation of Israel, had been pillaged time and time again, and the wall was torn down. It was in complete disarray. And so Nehemiah asks for resources and authority to go back and rebuild the nation of Israel. That's his dream. But what he does to do that, to begin this dream of rebuilding the nation of Israel, is he sets out to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. He wanted to rebuild this wall. Why? Because walls at this point represented security and safety. And it meant that the people, the surrounding people around the wall of Jerusalem, would respect the city of Jerusalem. And so Nehemiah found himself in this liminal space, this hallway, where he was not where he currently was before, but he was trying to get to this new outcome, this new future in his life. And then Nehemiah experiences exactly what we all do in this liminal space. He experiences hardship and opposition. And some of this opposition came in different forms. First, he experienced intruders. There were people who liked to take advantage of this broken city beforehand, and when they begin to see this wall go up, they begin to intrude and try to stop it from happening because they realized their fun was going to be over if they didn't do something about it. And so Nehemiah literally writes that he had to split the workers in half. That half the people were going to be working to build the wall, and the other half of the people were going to be protecting the people who were working to build the wall. And then not only this, as they continue to build, they experience more opposition and fatigue. The workers get tired. Nehemiah gets tired, and so he has to push himself and his people. He has to lead. He has to inspire. But one of the reasons they're tired is because they experienced a grain shortage in the city. They couldn't go out of the city to get food, and so they had to rely on what they had. And then over time, as they're building this wall, they began to run out of grain. And so Nehemiah is experiencing all this opposition, and then finally, he's almost here. He's almost built the wall. It's almost done, and he has his greatest moment of opposition at this point. Here's what happens. It says, Nehemiah writes, "Now when it was reported to Sanballat." Now I want to pause here for a second because Sanballat is an important guy. Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, these are those intruders I was just talking about. These are the ones that took advantage of the city, and Sanballat specifically was not a good guy. And here's how you know this, because if your parents had given you the first name Sanballat, you would hate the world as well. And so Sanballat was not a good dude. He was not excited about this wall going up. And so they're going to start doing things to try to keep it from happening, but they realize that it's almost done. Nehemiah writes, "To Geshem the Arab, to the rest of our enemies, that I had rebuilt the wall and that no breach remained in it, although at that time I had not set up the doors and the gates." So it's almost there. It's just the doors and the gates that they have to finish. He goes on. So here's what Sanballat does. Sanballat and Geshem sent a message to me, Nehemiah, saying, "Come, let us meet together at Jephirim in the plain of Ono." You see, they realize that they've been going after the workers the whole time. They need to go after the leader of the workers. And so they try to draw Nehemiah away from the city and meet together. But Nehemiah knows this, and so he writes this. He says, "But they were planning to harm me." He sees through their plan completely. He knows exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to cut the head off the snake of this project so that it will not finish. The wall will not be completed. And so what does Nehemiah do in this moment? Well, he says, "So I sent messengers to them saying." And at this moment in Nehemiah's life and his leadership, we get incredible wisdom and insight into what it means to endure as leaders in our life. We get incredible insight into what it means to hold out, to suffer patiently, to push through, to get to the outcome that we ultimately want to find later on. And Nehemiah says these incredible words that gave him strength. And they're words that have impacted me in my life and so many other people that I know as well. Here's what Nehemiah said to them. He said, I am doing a great work. It is meaningful. It is significant. It is important. And I cannot come down. He says to them, this wall that I'm building, it's going to be to provide the nation of Israel with security and support. This is God's people. One day the Messiah is going to come out of the nation of Israel. And he said, this is a great work that I am doing. And because of that, no matter what you throw at me, no matter what you do, no matter what schemes you try to come up with, I will not come down. It's such a powerful statement. I'm doing a great work and I cannot come down. I want to try something to ask you guys to help me out with this. I want you to say this with me. And if you're watching online, I want to challenge you to say this as well if you're driving in your car, coffee shop, home, wherever you might be. I want you to say this with me, and you have masks on, so you might need to push it a little bit. I'm just challenging you if you guys want to do it. Okay, here we go. Ready? I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. I was a little muffled, but I understand. It's okay. It's such a powerful statement. It's what gave Nehemiah the strength in those moments to hold out and continue towards building this wall, completing what he wanted to do. You see, but it didn't stop there. Nehemiah said, why? Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? And Sanballat and his guys, they hear this response, and they try to take it a step further as well, and they try to scheme some more. They try to come up with more plans. And Sanballat actually sends a letter to Nehemiah and tells him, hey, I'm going to spread a rumor, and I'm going to tell the Persian king that you're going to come after him once this wall is completed. And he tells Nehemiah, the only way I'm not going to spread this rumor is if you come meet with me. And once again, Nehemiah sees right through this. He says, for all of them, we're trying to frighten us, thinking they will become discouraged with the work and it will not be done. Nehemiah knows what is happening here. And so Nehemiah, in this moment when it's almost done, he's saying to himself, I'm doing a great work. I cannot come down. But at this point, he's starting to run out of strength. And so what does he do? He writes this short little prayer. And it says this. He says, but now, O God, strengthen my hands. God, strengthen my hand. God, when I am almost out of strength, would you strengthen me to complete the work that I've set out to do? And you see, shortly after this, Nehemiah and the Jewish people finished the wall around the city. I love this story. There's so many leadership principles that we can pull from it. And there are really three big observations about leadership and Nehemiah that we pull from this story. The first is this, is that Nehemiah had clarity on his why. He had clarity on his why, and if you were here for part one, you might recognize we talked about what it means to have a why in life, a purpose. If you weren't here for part one, go back and watch it because it was so helpful, and really you can't get around it. You can't build towards anything in life if you don't know where you're headed in the first place. It's like playing golf in the dark. You're going to hit a golf ball and you don't know where it's going to go. You have to start with the end in mind. That's a phrase, more modern way to say finding your why. It's in a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, written by Stephen Covey, and he describes it this way. He says that the way you find your why is you start with the end in mind. You identify where you want to end up in life, and then you work backwards and put in the things that are going to allow you to get there. It's like, you identify where you want to end up with your finances. I think so often when it comes to finances, we just think, you know what, I'll cross my fingers, I want to be happy. But we don't do the work that allows us to get there. It's identifying where you want to go and then doing the work to say, okay, here are the steps I'm going to take. And when this opposition comes my way, I can say, you know what, I'm doing a great work right here, and I cannot come down. It's that whole work-life balance that we all experience and we all struggle with in our life. And it's starting with the end in mind means that we identify the kind of relationships and family dynamics that we want to have in our life later on. And so because of that, when work gets busy and there's a busy season, and I know there are busy seasons and that stuff happens, but when we experience that, we can say to ourselves, you know what, I'm doing a great work over here with my family, and because of that, I cannot come down. I'm going to have to go home earlier. I'm going to have to leave that to be done tomorrow. That's what starting with the end in mind looks like. You see, but even when we do that and we try to build towards the walls in our life, just like Nehemiah did, we experience opposition. It's that enduring thing. And that suffering patiently thing. And suffering patiently is tough because it doesn't sound fun, but Nehemiah knew that to be true because Nehemiah understood that pain is part of the process. That anytime we are building towards something meaningful and worthwhile in life, that there is a painful aspect to it. Oftentimes we want to shy away from what is uncomfortable, what is unsafe, what is difficult, what is awkward for us to have. But ultimately, pain is part of the process, and it's going to help us move towards where we want to go in life. Samuel Chan, the author that I referenced earlier on, he has this incredible statement. It's the main premise of his book, Leadership Pain. And if you guys, want to write something down, I mean, this one has just stuck for me for years since I have read this. And here's what he says about pain. He says, you'll only grow to the threshold of your pain. You'll only grow to the threshold of your pain. We all have a pain limit, not just physical, but just all the different types of pain we experience. And you will only grow to that threshold. The only way in which you grow past that is if you move your pain threshold up higher. It's the paradox of pain that we all experience. It's the very thing we try to avoid at all costs, but the very thing that's going to grow us the most. I know I've had the privilege to be on the other side of so many leaders and mentors, and I've watched them go through life and struggle, and some of them have been in that hellish hallway that we talked about earlier, and they've been going through these different seasons, and I watch them work and push and struggle and try to navigate it and try to figure it out. And then what's incredible, it's this paradox of pain. It was so painful, but on the other side of it, they look back and they go, you know what? I'm so grateful. I don't know if I'd wish that on anybody, but I'm so grateful that happened because I am the man or the woman that I am today as a result of the pain I experienced. It's this paradox. It's one of the reasons, I know I joked about it earlier, it's one of the reasons I'm terrified to be a parent sometimes. Because I know that I'm going to want to control and have security and make sure my kids are always safe. And I just know that that's going to not happen most of the time. Because I also know that the painful things they experience in life could be the things that allow them to grow the most, because that's what I've experienced in my life. The most painful situations have made me the person I am today. You'll only grow to the threshold of your pain. There's a refinement of pain analogy that I love. Pastor T.D. Jakes, he says it like this. He says, when you're born, you're like a key with no cuts in it. As you go through life, each wound, failure, hurt, cuts into that strip of metal. And one day, there is a clear click. Your pain has formed the key that slips into the lock that opens your future. It's so powerful. You're like a key with no cuts, and as you go through life, it's cut time and time again until finally the key can go in and it unlocks your heart, your soul, and who God ultimately made you to be. See, Nehemiah understood pain, and he knew how to push through those things. But he also experienced what we experience, and that is sometimes we're in that hallway, that liminal space, and we have no idea how to get to the end of it. We can't even see the end of what is in front of us. So leading ourselves to that outcome, and we just feel like we're stuck. You see, Nehemiah did this as well, and here's what he did as a result of that. It's that Nehemiah remembered God's faithfulness. In those moments where he didn't know what else to do, Nehemiah remembered God's faithfulness. One of the great things that made Nehemiah such an impactful leader is that he knew his limitations. And that knowing his limitations, he was a broken and imperfect person. And so when he got to that point where he said, you know what, I'm doing a great work and I cannot come down, but I'm at the end of myself at this point. He looked up and he said, oh God, strengthen my hands. One of my favorite books, there's so many incredible books on leadership. It's called A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. And it's about enduring through life. And it talks about so many different things, but it's by the author, the translator of the Message version of the Bible. His name is Eugene Peterson. And here's what he says about God's faithfulness. Look at this. He says, perseverance, or endurance for our conversation, is not the result of our determination. It is the result of God's faithfulness. Endurance is not the result of us white-knuckling our way through life and going, you know what, I'm just going to control, and I'm going to fight, I'm going to work harder, I'm going to get up earlier. No, because we are imperfect, we are broken, and we all have limitations. He says that perseverance, endurance is the result of God's faithfulness. It's a result of those moments where we choose to lean in and look up and we go, God, I don't have strength today. God, I don't know what to do. God, I can't see the outcome. In fact, I don't even know if you're hearing me right now. But God, would you come be my strength today? God, would you come be my courage today so I can just put one foot in front of the other and I can continue to lead to the place that I want to go, and I want to bring my family and I want to bring the people that are in my life. Oh God, strengthen my hands. To conclude this series, our fourth brick of leadership is this simple but profound statement. And it's this: the intelligent and sensible leaders say, I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. They understand their why, where they're headed. They understand that it's going to be hard, that pain is part of the process, and when they don't have it in them anymore, that they can rely on their Heavenly Father who is for them and loves them more than they know. To wrap up our time, I just want to really provide an opportunity for everybody in this room. And what I want to do is I want to challenge each of y'all to invite God in on whatever areas of your life you find yourself in this liminal space, this hallway, wherever you're at. Perhaps today you need to say to yourself, I'm doing a great work in my marriage. Gosh dang, I don't know what to do, but I cannot come down. Or maybe you need to say to yourself, I'm doing a great work with my kids and they're teenagers and I have no clue what to do now. But you know what? I'm doing a great work and I cannot come down. I'm doing a great work with this relationship or this thing at work or whatever it might be, the people that I'm leading, my opportunity to volunteer. And because of that, you know what? I will not come down. Perhaps that's you. Perhaps you've never really invited God into your life like that before. I want to provide an opportunity for you to do that. Or maybe perhaps you find yourself in that hallway and it feels like hell and you don't know what to do. And you feel stuck, and you keep trying to figure things out, but you just can't see the end. If that's you, then I want to challenge you. I want to encourage you to lean on a source of strength that is infinitely greater than your own, a God who loves you and is for you. And it's not this instant gratification thing, but just by opening your hands and saying, oh God, strengthen me, help me put one foot in front of the other, you can perhaps experience the faithfulness of God in your life. To wrap up, Jamie's going to sing a song. It's called The Battle Belongs. And it's just all about this idea that we are all fighting a battle. We're all in this space. And ultimately, what's incredible is the battle already belongs to our Heavenly Father. So y'all listen to this.
And as I walk through the shadows, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear now, for I am safe with you. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And if you are for me, who can be against me? For Jesus, there's nothing impossible for you. And all I see are the power of God. You shine in the shadows. You win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of God. Nothing can stand against the power of God. So when I fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Oh God, the battle belongs to you.
Would you guys pray with me? God, we are humbled by the fact that we get to have a relationship with you, that each day in this hallway that we find ourselves in sometimes, and we're enduring and we're fighting and we're striving and we're working and we fall short, God, that your grace is sufficient in those moments. And so, God, would you come be our strength to help us lead lives that make an impact, not just on ourselves and those in our families and our relationships, but other people as well, that we can leave a mark of leadership in our area and our influence. So God, give us what we need to do what you've called us to do, and ultimately, oh God, strengthen our hands. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you guys for being here today. We'll see you next week as we begin a new series called Navigating the Season. You all have a great Sunday.